Welcome to My Business Matters, the Michigan Chamber podcast.
Welcome. I'm Jim Holcomb, President and CEO of the Michigan Chamber of Commerce. And today we're going to be talking about the future of mobility. It's an issue that's been in the news a lot lately and really represents a major transition for Michigan's automotive industry. Many in Michigan do take great pride in the fact that we were the state to put the world on wheels. And many of those same people are now working to ensure that we remain a world leader in the innovation and production of the next generation of transportation. We're so lucky today to have two of those leaders joining us. We have Kathryn Snorrason, the state's Interim Chief Mobility Officer and Head of Michigan Office of Future Mobility and Electrification. And also we have Glenn Stevens, the Executive Director of MICHauto. That's a statewide industry association to promote, grow, and retain Michigan's automotive and next-generation mobility industries. He also serves as the VP of Automotive and Mobility Initiatives for the Detroit Regional Chamber of Commerce. Thank you both for joining us today. Kathryn, I want to start with you. Mobility, it's a term. We hear a lot about it. But I'm not sure everyone has the same understanding. Are we talking about electric cars? Are we talking about self-driving cars? Are there other modes of transportation covered? How would you define mobility?
Yeah, absolutely. For us at the Office of Future Mobility and Electrification, mobility refers to the technologies and services that enable people and goods to move around more freely. So you're right, a lot of people think of it as autonomous vehicles. But for us, it's much more than that. You know, mobility touches air, land, and sea. And just some examples beyond autonomous vehicles, you know, it's providing affordable payment options for public transit through a mobility wallet, delivering food and essential goods using autonomous bots, or maybe even electric bikes and providing electric charging bike share stations with a solar panel roof. So it is pretty broad for us. So
you're really looking at touching most every person in the state of Michigan in some way, form, or fashion.
Absolutely.
And Glenn, listeners now they have a better understanding of what the concept of mobility is. From your seat, how do you view the general landscape in Michigan currently?
Well, I'd say we're doing pretty well with regards to what is probably the most seismic shift to our industry in 120 years of its history. If you go back a few years, we didn't have a lot of focus on the industry that we know today and really where it was going, but you know, we formed an initiative back in 2015 with several other associations and groups. And back then, the idea of an American Center for Mobility was just an idea. The idea of Michigan Central being a mobility center was not even being talked about. And we didn't have an office of future mobility and electrification like we do now. So I think we're moving in the right direction. A lot has happened, and we're setting ourselves up, and we're collaborating. A lot of work to be done yet.
What about you, Kathryn? From your perch, how do you see the mobility in Michigan, what our current landscape is?
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing a lot of good movement in that space, both mobility and electrification. Just in January of this year, CNBC named Michigan one of 3 states poised to dominate the electric vehicle battery manufacturing space by 2030, alongside Georgia and Kentucky. And then 2 more came out right after that. So we're just seeing great momentum. In February, there was an article from Newsweek highlighting that U.S. automakers and their work aim to make Detroit the next Silicon Valley. And in March, just last month, a report showed Michigan winning the battery and clean energy race after landing 14 new projects totaling $20 billion of investment and 13,000 jobs since August of 2022. So we're in a really unique position, having our office and working alongside MICHauto to really lead Michigan and ensure we are a leader in both the mobility and electrification space, and some good news coming out of that. It's great to see.
You used an interesting word, dominate. I think that's something that a lot of people in Michigan, they want to make sure we dominate many sectors of the economy, make sure we're growing Michigan and providing good quality jobs. What do you think is the most important thing that people need to think about right now as they talk to policymakers, as they think about it in their own life? How does Michigan really move into that dominant role?
Yeah, absolutely. A number of ways. So we actually have a mobility state strategy called the My Future Mobility Plan. So we really see our leadership in 3 ways. 1, transitioning and growing our mobility industry and workforce. 2, focusing on transportation, safer, greener, more accessible. And that transportation is not only with your personally owned vehicle, but also through public transit. And then the third piece where we see leadership is around policy and innovation. So we announced that state strategy at the auto show last year, and it has 11 goals that we're working on across the state, both in the public and private sector. But that's really the key to our success here, making sure that we're all working together, collaborating, finding more funding sources to fuel our work here in the state and reach this set of 11 goals.
Glenn, as you look out, obviously when you're transitioning a whole industry and there's a lot of new skill sets that are needed, how is Michigan preparing itself to make sure we have the workforce we need to fill these jobs that we can attract to Michigan?
Yes, I thought about that, and I think we're really in a good place there too. And the reason I say that is we have collaboration. There's no shortage of funding that's being made available, and I give a couple organizations a lot of credit, and that is the MEDC and LEO, the Labor and Economic Opportunity Office, and OFME, Kathryn's organization, is part of that. Everybody's talking to each other. In fact, we had everyone in our office, including some of the new players that are entering into it. So I think we've identified what needs to be done, but there's a lot of wild cards and a lot of unknowns still with regards to what this transition is, what the curve is, what the different skills that are going to be required. What we do know is two things are driving things, and this will drive job changes too, and that is sustainability, meaning electrification and other fuel cells, and digitalization. There is more technology in everything around us. The people of Michigan are going to need more and more digital skills, and this is something we're very aware of and something we're driving to prepare people for.
Certainly, electric vehicles, they get a lot of the attention in the public. They're becoming much more commonplace on the roads, and many auto companies are certainly full speed ahead gearing up for that transition. But some consumers still aren't quite sold yet. What do you think accounts for a little bit of the fear or disconnect with some of the consumers who aren't quite sure that electric is the way to go for them?
Well, sure. I'll take that first, and Kathryn can supplement. But basically, when people look at EVs today, they are either expensive, there are charging issues, there are range issues, or there are infrastructure issues, and they all tie together. And on the expense side, the average price of an EV right now is $61,488. An internal combustion engine vehicle is $48,000. So there's quite a disparity there. Both are very expensive. But we found here recently, the Chamber did a survey of 600 registered voters. We found some very surprising results, and it's really a mindset. So I think that as we look at adoption here in Michigan, we're going to have a cultural shift, because 46% of people believe that the automakers are driving the shift, and 44% of people oppose it because they think that the environmental or the government are driving it. So we really have a disconnect there. And 18% of consumers are really looking at it as something that they don't want to even consider. And 60% of the people we said won't even buy one the next time that they're looking at a vehicle. So what I'm saying here is we really have a disconnect in a mindset in addition to those structural things which we know. So we know we need to overcome, but it's going to take all of us working together on that.
Is that a public education type approach to change that mindset, or is it just something natural that happens when you have such a dramatic change in a transitioning industry? Does it just happen over time and we have to be patient with it?
Well, I think it's both. In fact, one of the calls that the OFME and the Council for Future Mobility called for is that we need to do some marketing and branding work around what needs to be done to talk about sustainability and how important it is, and what people can do to contribute to that. But it is really going to be market-driven, too. People are going to buy based on what's available to them, what they can afford, and whether or not, in this case, they can charge it. 80% of the charging is done in the home. So there's a lot of factors we need to work out here.
Kathryn, how about you? How do we overcome some of these challenges with consumers just to make sure that people feel comfortable, because it is a dramatic shift?
Yeah, and just to emphasize that dramatic shift, we see the Biden administration propose a new auto pollution limits that would require up to 2/3 of new vehicles sold in the U.S. to be electric by 2032. And that's nearly a 10-fold increase over current electric vehicle sales. So it is absolutely a huge shift. And Glenn hit it right on the head, right? We need to see, more education and, excited to see a lot more options come out on the market, right, for people to explore for their different needs to move around the state and around the country. And that'll help us also see the price drop, too, right? As technology improves, more options are out there. and then reducing some of that anxiety, right? It's a new technology for people to get used to. So we need to ensure that we reduce that range anxiety in the state, continue to install more charging stations, and a lot of that's coming from both federal and state funds. Michigan was awarded $110 million through the federal NEVI program, and then Governor Whitmer is proposing $65 million on top of that as part of her next fiscal year budget proposal. And then she also proposed to cut sales tax as well. So we're trying to show how we have the infrastructure to support these electric vehicles, reduce that anxiety there, reduce the cost for someone purchasing a vehicle. And then our office is also testing out new technology solutions, again, to help that customer experience. So one company that we supported with a grant is called ChargeWay. And so in Lansing and Traverse City, ChargeWay helps to improve the customer experience at dealerships when purchasing an EV. They have a training and sales tool for employees, but then they also have an educational tool for customers, which just makes that buying experience a little bit easier, right?
Yeah, and you make a good point about, transitioning just some of the infrastructure, the charging stations, making sure people have access. If we're doing that, how are we doing on ensuring we have the infrastructure available to not only create, but to distribute the electricity that's going to be needed for all these new vehicles on the road? Are we prepared for that as a state, or do we have a plan for it?
Yep, absolutely. So our office does have a coordinating function across the state. So we do work with utilities and MPSC, the Michigan Public Service Commission, to have these discussions and also to test out new technology that has low impacts on the grid, too. So one grant that we provided to a company called eCamion, they have chargers that are designed to operate independently of the grid and rely on very little power, making them ideal for those more remote rural areas. And then, we do have a goal in our state strategy that 80% of the charging would happen during off-peak hours. So, again, having smart tools to ensure that happens and incentives as well to lower those impacts on the grid. And, these cars do serve as batteries on the road, right, and at your home. So we can look at reverse power flow. And, a lot of us have seen that Ford F-150 Lightning commercial where the truck actually powers your home during an outage. So there are a lot of ways that these vehicles can be additive to the grid and help us smooth it out as well.
Glenn, you made a comment earlier that a lot of people look at this, through different lenses, and one of them is environmental lens. And as we discuss mobility, a lot of the public discussion is about the new jobs, the manufacturing, what's new on the horizon, the technology innovation. How are we preparing for whatever environmental constraints come on the back end when a car has reached its useful life? How do we prepare to make sure we can be environmentally sensitive in how we take care of that waste when the car is done being used?
Yeah, and I think, and kind of going back to that last question too, I think we have to be very realistic about the cost and the attainability of some of the goals that have been set. The Biden administration goals are very ambitious with regards to the fuel economy and the emission standards. Maybe not attainable as currently written. And when you look at the grid and you look at transmission, we have a lot of work to do there. There's a lot of work and a lot of studies being done, but there's a lot that needs to work out. And when you look at, where these batteries come from and how they're created and where they are recycled and brought back into the system, there's a lot of work to be done there. 91% of the batteries right now come from 3 foreign countries, and that includes the minerals. And when you look at the recycling side of things, we are really in unknown territory there because we really haven't gone there yet. What I would say is that Michigan is perfectly positioned because of the amount of research and development that goes on in our state to be leaders in those parts of the equation when it comes to particularly recycling. There's some great advanced university projects that are going on at Michigan, Michigan State, Wayne State, and Michigan Tech. And I'm very optimistic that we can help solve some of these problems because there's a lot of unknowns right now.
Yeah. Kathryn, I've heard you say in other conversations I've been a part of with you, you talk about the term mobility credentialed. And certainly a lot of industries in Michigan, they have a talent shortage right now. How do we prepare to make sure that the workforce of the future is prepared to undertake the skills and develop the products we need?
Yep, absolutely. So it is about transitioning our workforce, making sure we're ready for those needs of the future. And a lot of partners and organizations are focused on this workforce effort across the state. MEDC, our office, OSME, Leo that we mentioned earlier, MICHauto, and many others. So just two programs I'll highlight. One is around the installation of chargers. So we have an EV Charging Jobs Academy. So this is a workforce training program to develop a labor pool of specially certified electricians to do that install and maintenance, ensuring, both the worker safety and that end user confidence in safety. This is a $4 million grant that will act as a line of credit, and it's led through the Leo employer-led collaborative, SEMCA. And then the second one I want to highlight that we are really excited about is the Michigander EV Scholars Program. So this is through MEDCE's new Talent Action Team. They'll pilot they have recruitment efforts in a public-private partnership with 15 major Michigan employers and academic institutions. So the kickoff includes the debut of the program featuring $10,000 in scholarships to as many as 350 tech students at participating universities. The students just have to sign that letter of employment with an approved company and commit to staying for 12 months in Michigan. And I know there's some programs that Glenn leads as well, but these are all workforce programs that we're ensuring Michigan is a leader in transitioning our workforce to the needs of the future.
Yeah, that's great.
Jim, if I could just add something real quick on to that, I would echo what Kathryn said. I feel very comfortable about the plans we have for the current workforce and what we need to do to transition and develop. But I can't underscore enough the things that we talk about all the time. The state of our base level education must improve, and we have to provide better pathways for our people to be understanding of what the jobs are going to be able to be available to them. And I'll give you one real quick example, and that is the fact that Michigan is 47th in the country in the ratio of students to counselors. That's not acceptable. We have to get back to closer to the national average or better, and the national average is 450. So we have, in order for us to get people into the right jobs, we've got to provide them better pathways and better base level education and communities to live in. So it's really a holistic equation when we look at it.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more on that. That we hear from our members all across the state that education is just going to be so crucial to moving many industries forward, not just mobility or the auto industry. We need to make sure our educational system is serving the needs of all citizens and making sure we all have a path to a prosperous future here. Well, I can't believe it, but our time is already flying by. I want to thank you both for being here, but I also want to give you, the last minute to let us know where can we hear more about you or find out more about your organization. So, Kathryn, if you want to let people know how they can find you on the web or Twitter.
Yep, please go to michiganbusiness.org. We have an OFME page and an entire page for our grant platform as well.
Glenn, what about you? How can people find out more about you and your organization?
Sure. We're at MICHauto.org. You can also follow us on social media channels, and I'm on Twitter, too, trying to talk about positive things that we're doing in the industry and what's going on around Michigan, too.
That's great. We all want to be positive. Michigan is a great place to live, work, and raise a family, and I think mobility is only going to add to that. So thank you both for joining us today.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.